ego. And how much sacrifice you're ready to do to kill your ego is all that matters. That's why, like in Tao, they say like there was a guru, in Chinese teacher, right, a sage, and had 2 sishyas, and they went to some gathering, and one sishya comes back, and then one guy says, I really prevailed in the whole thing. Everybody was looking at me that I'm such and such and my knowledge and this and that. And the other shishya says that I don't know about knowledge, but everybody were my friends by the end of the party. I got to meet everybody. So it shows the difference where you want to going there to impress everybody or you want to be friends with everybody. So to become friends with everybody, you have to dissolve your ego. You have to dissolve that you're higher than others and you're trying to impress. All those things just building up your ego. So find things like that. Whatever you do, whether you want to take credit for everything or not. So that's why the whole aspects of religion is based on dissolving your ego or carrying on your ego. So it's just, that's what it is basically. So sometimes we don't realize that we're building up our egos for fake reasons. Like for example, they say, all right, say I grew a tulip. And I say, he said, did you? Did you grow the tulip? He said, where did you get the bulb from? Oh, I bought it from such and such store. Okay, then what did you do? Well, I planted in the soil. Okay, well, did you make the soil? No, soil was always there. And then what happened? He said, then I put some fertilizer. Did you make fertilizer? Oh no, I bought it from. And then what happened throughout the winter? Well, the temperature went down to the 0 degrees because it needs the freezing so that it can bloom in springtime. Did you manage to bring the temperature? Oh no, it just happened, you know. and then in the springtime, nice sun came, temperature started rising, the freeze melted, and this and that, and the beautiful tulip came out. Right. And you saying you grew the tulip. You didn't do nothing, you know. So it's like when what did you really do? The cow made the milk. Right. Somebody delivered the milk. Right. Nobody made the water. You know, you didn't do it. So we put our stamps of doership as if like on a day-to-day basis even. But again, for practicality purpose, we use those words, and we don't mean it, fortunately. But a lot of things we do mean it.
Your husband, we're not going to get any credit. Farmer grew the crops. What food you made?
But if you remember in the retreat, right? They give us the strawberry, right? And simple act of strawberry, when you put that strawberry in the mouth. Right. But before that, you hold on to that strawberry, and Guruji is here. So they make you realize from the time that the strawberry was grown by a farmer to all the distributors they handled in between, and whatever went in, the sun shone on it, and the water came in, the weather did so much part, and all these things, factors went in, and before you had a strawberry in your hand. Did you ever appreciate, did you ever thank to all these entities involved? Whatever may be the reason, money was involved or not, it doesn't matter. But at least you have it in your hand. There are so many people responsible for it. Now, obviously, if every single moment you think about that, you'll go crazy. Yes. But that's not the point. Is to realize that we have to appreciate the whole universe that is playing part in our entity. And that shows our desire, our egos will subdue itself, that we are not the doers. The purpose is not to drive you crazy, that you think about non-ego, non-ego, non-ego all the time. It should not become a project, because that itself is ego-driven. Oh, I killed my ego. I killed my... So, and that's why to reach Paramatma, dissolving ego is important, but they always say it's 50-50. Yeah. So Kabir says that I am Loha, right? And my desire to acquire Paramatma is becoming so strong, I'm heating up inside, right? And when I heat up to sufficient degree that my desire reaches to the mumukshatvam state, the intense desire to acquire God, right? But it carries you to only certain extent. Right. Beyond that, the grace has to come in. And why the grace has to come in? Because at some point the ego has to dissolve. Right. Otherwise people will say, I acquired God. Right. You can never acquire God. Because it is never driven by the action. If it was driven by the action, somebody would have done a better job than you.
Right.
So it takes you only to certain point, and beyond that the grace has to flow.
Right.
So when the loha, the iron is so hot, and the other side of the equation has to heat up, and the seam in between has to dissolve, and it has to look as a single piece. So at that point you cannot say whether you did it or Paramatma was the grace.
Right.
So ultimately the ego has to dissolve. And that's why the Gnan Path is always considered tough. Because in Gnan Path, they always, ego, they're always there. Saying, I have this knowledge and that knowledge and this and that. But in Bhakti Yoga, the ego is never there right from the beginning.
From the beginning.
Which is good. But at the same time, sometimes that becomes mechanical. Because then they say, I did so many Ram mantras, I wrote down, then there is also ego play in that. I donated so much to the temple, this and that, because I did so much. And even though they're doing it, they're counting it. So the ego has some role in that too. So they both have to merge at some point. So the ego can only take you, non-ego state can only take you to a certain point. And beyond that, Paramatma has to step in and take it over, right? So we have to realize that this is all a role. Like in Ramayana, like when a true Ram, for example, came as a human being and start playing it. But right now, you are all Ram. We all are Ram, right? But we forgot that what we are. But when we start playing the role of Ram, all of a sudden in the middle of play, you realize that, oh my God, this is me, right? And then you take it from there. So you have to start believing that you are the true Nirgun Nirakar state. And for that, meditation is extremely important because you realize that state inside. And that's the first step. But then every single day, whatever activities you do, you always remember your state that you experienced in the meditative state. And then it becomes a reality. Otherwise, it's just a talk, right? So, all along, then you start believing that you are Atma having a body experience rather than you are the human body trying to get a Atma experience. It's the other way around. Then the equation starts tilting that you are always been Atma and you will always stay as Atma. It's just you are temporarily here to have a human experience. So it's a little shift of consciousness. So Jinchandra Maharaj gives an example of a murderer. He committed a murder and he's running away. And the soldiers are after him. So he runs and runs and runs. He comes across a river. The river is so roaring and there is a storm going on. And the waters are so wild. And he had no other way to go. The soldiers were coming from the other side. The only way to do would be to jump, which was a clear suicide because the waters were really very fast, right? The currents were very fast. So he thought, if I jump in, I'm going to die.
Sure.
All of a sudden, he sees a sannyasi there. And he's in a deep meditative state. So he says, why don't I do the same thing? So he takes a little dip into the water and then he puts all the bhasma and all that around and puts himself. He takes a stance of a samadhi, sannyasi. So he sits down like a sannyasi. So soldiers come and they believe what they see. So they never think that this will be the murderer. So actually the soldiers come, bow down, praise to him and takes his blessing and then they leave. Now meanwhile, something is happening to the murderer. And he says, just the copying a sannyasi gives me so much peace. And while he was there, he started experiencing realizing his own true self. He says, even a temporary 15 or 20 minutes of fake role of a sannyasi relieved me so much miseries. What am I doing? Maybe I might as well become sannyasi. And he did become sannyasi rest of his life. And then he went on the journey. So sometimes things like this happen. But for that you have to believe that this is a role that we're playing. And you have to make efforts to start realizing, even though it's a make-believe, then you have to start realizing that you are the Atma. And play your day-to-day life like an Atma. And your true Nirgun Nirakar self, Paramatma. And then maybe someday you will wake up and come out of this mudta that you've been suffering from. So someday, hopefully, we'll remember our true nature and we'll move on. And this dream will be over at some point. Because this is basically a dream. What happens in a dream? In a dream, senses are useless. Whatever you're creating, you're not really using your senses. It's the past memories that are stored in your mind, and you're just playing with it from the experiences that you had gathered from the senses. But the senses themselves are inactive, right? And there is a movement happening, but at the same time you're steady. You could travel 10,000 miles in a dream, and somebody asks, he says, yeah, I traveled everywhere, but you didn't go anywhere. So it's like a weird experience, right? Same thing when we live our day-to-day life. Whenever we're spending time in the past, we're just bringing those experiences. We are not using senses. The senses we are using is only in the current moment. So past is a recreation. It's basically a dream. You may think of that you might have run down the slope on the ski and then you did this and that, but it's just a rerunning of your motions. But they are not real actual emotion. You could be sitting here and thinking of the movement state that you had created, right? So it's a movement, but it's not a movement. So it's a dream. And the same thing is the future. You are not there yet. You could be traveling at 10,000 miles an hour to the spacecraft or whatever in the future, but you're not there. You haven't gone anywhere. So both are dream-like states, past or the future. So dreams, again, you're not achieving anything in the dream. From the moment you go to sleep to the time you wake up, what do you achieve? Nothing. Right. To achieve something, you have to be awake again. Whatever, even though it is material, right? So dream state is a useless state. The sleep is useless. You need it only to rejuvenate your energy. That's about it. But as far as any kind of growth is not possible in a dream state. So whenever you're thinking of the past or the future, you're really wasting your time because you're not achieving anything. The only growth, whether material or spiritual, can happen only in the present because it's an active, dynamic state. And real uplifting, again, is going back to our theories, like you can achieve, only spiritual achievement will stay with you. So that's where the differentiating point will have to come in. Some people will say, okay, I will stay in the present state, but I will achieve materially. But then the philosophy comes in and the wisdom comes in, where you realize that material achievements don't mean anything. So that's when, so you have to employ your 100% energy as much as you can in achieving the spiritual achievements rather than the material. But that can happen only in the nimish. The nimish is the only moment that is available to you, right? So, and nimish itself, we had decided, is an illusion, because again, to go for material achievement, you need your senses. But we know that senses fool us. The present moment can be lived, but cannot be perceived. So that itself is an illusion too. So it's another dream state we're following. So, basically, so whatever life experiences you go through, if you remember your true Paramatma state, then nothing will really bother you. Whatever you achieve will not make you proud of it, because there is no sense of doership. It's an happening. Happening that is happening because of the universal forces, not necessarily because of your doing. A lot of times, if you really thought that you were so smart in achieving, what happened to the other investments? If you really thought you were that smart, how come you didn't do this? It's just a lot of factors play part. So universal forces are the creators. And those universal forces, there are a humongous amount of energies at play. And your failure and success, both are not from your doership. So that's why when you realize that, then you start becoming an observer. Then even your achievements will not deter you from your path of spirituality. Actually, achievements are more of a deterrent than the failures. Failures, we always blame it on somebody else. But achievement, we always want to keep. And that's where, so when you achieve something, that's the time to be careful. So when you fail, obviously, we're going to say, oh, he did this and he did that and she did that. And that's typical American way of thinking. Oh, it's somebody else, but not me. But achievements are very difficult to assign to somebody else. So that's why we have to be careful. So, the next slok, Jimchandra Maharaj, I'm not going to get into the Sanskrit part of it, but what it means that the time is eating up steady and the mobile things. Nothing is going to be left. So, it's like time is a big crunching machine that's gobbling up all these things. And before you know, all your egos is going to be crushed. I mean, you think of all the battlefields where thousands of soldiers were laid down. They all died from, and they all took their own egos. They had their projections, they had their ashas, and they all that, and whatever they wanted, desires and dreams and all, everything is down to dust. So we realize that when people die, they take their emotions and everything, and projections and future projects and everything is going to be down into the ashes. Down, dust to dust and ashes to ashes. So the time is gobbling up all these things. It's like Yamraj is eating up all your desires. It's like a big black hole. What happens in a black hole? All the galaxies are all crunched up. It's an amazing state, right? It will be an amazing place to be. So galaxies are, galaxies don't mean nothing, And what are galaxies? Galaxies have like billions and billions of stars. Our sun is like a tiny star in that. And sun is so big for us. Out of all those planets that are circling around, even Earth doesn't even come close to the Jupiter and Saturn. They are humongous, like bigger than the Earth itself. And what is Earth compared to our existence and our ego? So what are we, in our state? And all these things are circling around, basically like flushing down the toilet. So black holes are the toilets. They crush out everything, including the time. The time is all gobbled up because nothing can escape, and the space is gobbled up. The time and space comes into a singularity. Nothing exists at the black hole level. It's an amazing experience if you can, something like that. So whether the big emperor, whether you could be a big emperor or you could be a poor beggar, you're all going to come to the same state. So those things don't mean nothing. So none of this thing is to make you depressed, because it's always to make you aware of a nitya state. That's what we're going to go into. So every time, whatever comes in front of you, any situation, you have to analyze in a proper way, where you don't get sucked into the ego state. So that's why that slok in Kathopanishad, that really I love it, is they say Shreyascha Prayascha Manushyam Etaha. Shreya and prayer. Shreya is something that's good for you. Prayer, that is something pleasant to you. But good, Shreya and prayer, both will be presented to Manushyam. Shreyascha Prayascha Manushyam Etaha. Manushya will be presented two things in front of him. Shreya and prayer. Tau Samparitya Manushyam Dhiraha. Dhiraha is somebody who is dhir, gambhir. Somebody who is wise, will evaluate the situation. Tau Samparitya Manushyam Etha. Dhir Gambhir Manushya will evaluate the whole situation. How? Shreyohi Dhirabi Prayasham Vrunite. Dhir person means wise person will select Shreya over prayer. Prayer, something that is pleasant to your senses. Shreya, something that is good for you. So a dhir person will select Shreya over prayer. And what will happen to the person who is not wise is described as manda in Sanskrit. Unwise person is described as manda. What a manda person will do? He will select prayer over Shreya. And what will happen if you select prayer? Because prayer has everything to do with ego. Prayer is something that pleases your senses. Now, your senses is the key word. So my senses, I like this, I don't like this. My likes and dislikes, there is a stamp of ego attached to that, right? So what was going to happen to the mando? Manda will select prayer over Shreya. So then the cycle of yoga kshema will start. Yoga is all the efforts that you go through to acquire something. Now your journey towards that object is going to make you differentiate from somebody else who is not running after that object. He may be running after another object, that's besides the point. So that's where duality will start, right? So, preyo mando yoga kshemat vrunite. He will select, a manda person will select something that is pleasant. And the journey of an individual Atma that will differentiate Jivatma from Paramatma will start that rut of yoga kshema. So yoga is all the efforts that you have to go through to acquire that object. And once you acquire, then also the run does not end. Because kshema is all the efforts that are needed to hold on to whatever you have acquired, or you try to get rid of whatever you acquire. First, your running for Haagen-Dazs went on, and then your weight went up, so then you run for Jenny Craig, and it does not end. Continue. Now you are caught. Then your cholesterol, then you run for doctor's visit, and then the diabetes, and then you're pinching all the fingers, then checking the A1C, then this, it never ends. The wise person sees the futility in this. So the time to become wise is before you select. So the wisdom is where your love, the philosophy is the love for wisdom. The wisdom has to rise before you make a choice. That's why Krishnamurti, I always quote, Krishnamurti said, freedom to choose is a great freedom, but freedom from your choices is the ultimate freedom. So before you make a choice, you choose whether you want to get into the rut of yoga kshema or you want to stay free forever. Be free. That's the message of spirituality. The only way you can become free, you realize and apply that